Hey everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to make this Jack Skellington pumpkin from The Nightmare Before Christmas. So I've got two 8-inch cakes. I'm just going to stack those, so just fill and stack. I've put it on a 12-inch board. We are going to cut quite a lot of the cake off to create a pumpkin shape. So I'm just going to fill it just with a little bit of jam. I don't want too much because I don't want the cakes to be slipping. So here they are all stacked. And then I've just got my scissors and I've just put some dowels through the middle to stop the cakes from sliding all over. Now these cakes are frozen. I prefer to carve a frozen cake because the cake is just a lot more firmer. There's a lot less crumbs that come off. And the cake is less likely to have any breakage as well. So just trimming it off, we want it to be quite rounded all the way around, but we don't want a perfect circle. We kind of want an oval shape for this one. I mean, you could really make the pumpkin any shape that you wanted. You could do a tall pumpkin, a fat pumpkin. Obviously, due to COVID restrictions, this cake didn't need to feed that many people. So I went for a kind of smallish pumpkin. So you want to taper it in along the bottom, just to obviously create that round shape, and obviously taper it in at the top as well. So just be careful that you don't go too far deep into the cake, but we definitely want to take the majority of the edges off the cake, and obviously try to taper it all the way around as well. If you do get any bits of cake that do look like they're going to break off, you can ganache first and just cover it over with ganache and then look to trim it over once it's been in the fridge for a bit. That will just help the cake stay together and it will stop big chunks from breaking off. So you can see I'm just tapering it in around the bottom. And if you use a little bit of ganache just to stick this onto the board, it should hold its shape quite well. So once you're happy with the shape, I'm going to cover this in some ganache. Now I do have a video for how to make ganache, and this one is the white chocolate one. So the ratio that I use is 4:1. So for every 400 grams of chocolate, there would be 100 milligrams of cream, double cream. So just make sure that you give the cake a good coating. Now for this one I did give it quite a thick coating on the second layer. The reason being is I want to actually make a mark in the chocolate for the pumpkin. So none of the cake should really be visible. And when you're doing your ganache, you really need to make sure that you follow the tapered line across the bottom, because you don't want to just fill in what we just took off there. We want to keep that line coming in to give us a round effect for the pumpkin. So just work your way around and cover the whole entire cake. So here's what you should have once you have covered it. Now it doesn't need to be perfectly symmetrical because obviously pumpkins aren't that way, they're quite misshapen. And so what I've done is I've just got one of my tools and I'm just going to mark a line going up the centre. This will be the face. So just marking a line up the centre and removing that part of the ganache. And then once we've done that, we're just going to smooth it over with our fingers so that when we cover it with fondant, we can mark in these lines, and obviously you've got quite a smooth area for it to go in. And you want to do this around the whole entire pumpkin, trying to get the lines to come up at the top and a little bit of a dint in the top, which is where the middle of the, I don't actually know what you call that bit of the pumpkin, but sort of like the woodeny bit at the top comes out. Something like that. And we're just going to cover it in white. Now you could use this tutorial to create an actual pumpkin with a different face. In that case, I wouldn't cover it with white fondant, I would have covered it with orange fondant, just so that obviously when you airbrush it later on you could add, some more shading and some texture as well. So smoothing the pumpkin all the way around the front, working your way around the back, obviously using the pleating method that you use to cover any type of cake, just working a section at a time. So once it's covered, you should have something like this. And so I'm just going over that with my Flexi Smoother, and I'm just taking out any of the bumps that are there or any of the ridges that have been formed by the fondant coming down. So just rubbing over those areas. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go around the pumpkin and make sure that you've now covered, sort of like done the indentation of your finger through the areas that we marked out before. You can see I've put a little dip in the top of the pumpkin as well. So just being careful just to smooth out those edges and trimming off any excess across the bottom also. You could cover your board first if you wanted to. It's just I've always covered the board after the cake has already been on there. So now we're going to mark in the eye. And so I'm just freehanding this. You could cut off a template if you wanted to. We're going to give him sort of like kind of creepy eyes, like he'll have raised eyebrows. Now you can put the eyebrows underneath the chocolate and the fondant if you wanted to. It's just that I didn't really know what shape I was going to do the eyes, and I wanted to sort of cut them out first before I then put on any kind of eyebrows. So I'm just marking it out with my Dresden tool, and then once I'm happy with the shape, the final shape, I'm just going to cut that circle out. So you can see I'm just going in with the scalpel and just cutting that area out. Now I'm going to peel that off and I'm going to pop that to one side. Now I haven't wet the pumpkin when I put the fondant on there, and the reason for that being is so that when I cut out this shape, that piece of fondant came out and it came out really nice and clean. It didn't get stuck to the pumpkin at all, or you didn't end up having to pull it and distort the shape of it. So once you've done one eye, we're going to go ahead and do the other. Now his eyes are not symmetrical, so they are very similar, but they are not symmetrical, so don't spend too much time in trying to make them perfect and both alike. So we're just going to cut that shape out as well and just going to pop that to one side for later. So now I've got some black fondant which you can't see on the board, and I've just literally taken the whites that we've cut out of the pumpkin and I'm just tracing around that with my scalpel. And then I'm just going to pop that into the socket that we've just created. So leveling it up at the top, and then when you're pushing down you can see where the bit that I've cut is slightly too big, and so we're just going to go trim off that excess. And so if you end up cutting it a little bit too short, so you can see some of the ganache underneath the eye there, I'm just going to then use my fingers and my Dresden tool just to push that back into place so you can't see that gap. So just try to neaten the little flick off, and then just using the Dresden tool to push everything into place. So I'm just pulling it down, and then once I've pulled it down, I'm just smoothing it over with my thumb to take the marks from the tool out. And you're going to do exactly the same method for the other eye. So both eyes together look like this. Now I've rolled some sausages that are kind of pointy at one end and quite rounded at the other, and this is going to create the eyebrow. So I've put a little bit of water to stick it on, but I'm really just gauging the shape right now, just to make sure that I've got it right. I'm going to go ahead and do the other one exactly the same way. And so once those are both on and I'm happy with the size and the shape, I've took it off and I've just rolled out one side so you can see it's kind of flat, and I'm just sticking that back on over the eye. And then with a Dresden tool, I've just dipped it in a little bit of water and then I'm just smoothing over that join. So I'm not pressing too hard. With the water, it'll just make it go a little bit tacky, and it'll just allow you to blend in that line really smoothly. So I've got like a rubber tip tool that I got from Serra, and I'm just using that to go over the edges as well. Smoothing it out with your thumb, making sure that you can't see the join at the bottom. So once you've done that for both of the eyes, we're then going to cut out some nostrils. Now again, the nostrils are not symmetrical, they're different shapes. And so I've just cut out some little circles on either side, and we're just going to fill those with some black fondant. So just like that. A little bit of fondant in there. Again, just using the Dresden tool to push it into place to make sure the full nostril is filled. And then again, another little bit of fondant, and we're just going to pop that into place too. So next what we're going to do is we're going to draw in the mouth. So just with the Dresden tool again, just going to give him quite a wide grin on his face that's quite curled at the sides. So with the pointier end of your Dresden tool, we're going to create that smile first. And then we're just going to re-go over it with a wider leafing tool, just to make it so we can roll out some fondant and stick that fondant in that smile area. So just smoothing it over, a little bit of water just to stick it in. And then you can see I've rolled out quite a long strip of fondant, and I'm just going to start to push that in, just thread it into that gap that we've made. So it should stick quite nicely because the water's in there. Trim off any excess, and then do the same with the other side. Now I was contemplating rolling out little bits of fondant for the bits that go across his mouth, but I did just decide to paint those on. So I've just got some black sugar flare gel, the licorice colour, and I've just got a little bit of water on my brush, not too much, and I'm just going to paint up and then down, and I'm going to work my way around the mouth. Now, when you're following the shape of the mouth, you need to make sure that they're not all straight and that gradually they start to go out a little bit to follow the smile line. So you can see that I'm starting to turn my hand a little bit. And just using a little bit of water each time. If you use too much water, it'll drip down and it'll start to flood. And if you use too much water, you're not going to get like a black line. It'll be sort of like a lighter grey, and it'll be quite patchy as well. So we're going to do this for the whole entire mouth. So you can see I do the top and go down to the bottom. So you could give him any facial expression that you wanted. And again, you could use this method for an actual pumpkin. So once we've finished with the mouth, we're going to put the, I don't know what it's called, the like stalk on the head. So I've rolled like a fat unicorn horn that's quite pointy at one side, and I'm going to sort of roll it into sort of like it's wrapping around itself. I've got a kebab skewer that I've trimmed to the right height, and I'm going to pop that into the centre of the pumpkin, and then I'm going to pop this on top. A little bit of water just to stick it on. And then we're going to curl that up on itself and just stick it down with a little bit of water. You could leave this to dry for a little bit before you put it on. So you could leave it to dry and then put it on, and it'll hold its shape a lot better. I've decorated the board with some orange fondant with the wrap method that I use. Just make sure you smooth it all in and trim off the excess. So that's what you should have so far. So next we're just going to colour that little stalk that comes out in some black stripes. So I've just got some of my black fondant and I'm just going to wrap that around. So I'm wrapping it around to the back and then I'm pinching. And as I'm pinching, that'll be the bit that when I turn it around, those are the bits that I'll cut off to neaten it up at the back. And I've just stuck these on with a little bit of water. Again, I probably should have done this before I put the this part on, but I wasn't really thinking. So once we've finished with this bit, we're going to do some airbrushing. So I use the Spectrum Flow Black just because I really like the way that it sprays onto the cake. It doesn't give you sort of like a jet black line. It's almost like a bit dusty. You would need many layers to get it to be like a proper black airbrush colour. And so I just think it's really good for shading. It dries really quickly as well. And so with the airbrush, I'm going to go down each line around the bottom of the pumpkin, just around the eyes a little bit, and then just around that stalk bit that we created at the top. And then I'm going to do the inner of the board and the outer edge of the board as well. And these are really going to be the only areas that I shade with the airbrush. So you can see as I'm doing the edge of the board and even on the white cake, it is quite light. You will need a few coats just to get the edge of that board quite dark. But I just think for a black airbrush, it's really good because it takes a lot to build up the colour. Whereas sometimes they can be too dark and you kind of ruin it really quickly because it ends up being too much. So we're just going around the edge of the board quite lightly and quite far away as well because we want it to kind of fade into the board rather than be quite a heavy dark line around the outside. Same with around the pumpkin as well. Kind of left a little bit of the board full orange because I'm going to put a name and an age on the front of the cake, which is going to be in black. So I really wanted that to stand out from the rest of the board. I'm just covering around the eyes, making sure that I've got everywhere that I need to. So you can still see, even after a couple of coats, it's still quite light. And it's basically, as soon as you've stopped airbrushing, it's practically dry. Just going over the lines again that needed it, around the nostrils as well. So once you've finished, you should have something that looks like this. I hope you've enjoyed today's tutorial. If you have, please leave a comment down below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And if you'd like to watch more of my videos, please click the links on the screen now. Thanks for watching.